This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com, and I just finished listening to Dave Meltzer giving a detailed report on some of the reasons why AEW is considered uncool and has some quote unquote alarming issues that is causing it to lose tens of thousands of viewers a week. Here's one of the issues: they have their talent not respecting Tony Khan. Takashita, one of their talents, who is one of the main events of their upcoming Double or Nothing pay-per-view. Funny enough, they're considering this a major pay-per-view, but this John Moxley versus Takashita IWGP title match is a non-title match. And this Takashita guy says, quote, "Since arriving in America, if you were to ask me what I've found enjoyable, there's been nothing. In my heart, I've already thrown away the joys of wrestling. Everyone felt like they're having fun wrestling in Japan. I didn't had any fun ever since I got to America. The effort was bearing fruit, but I didn't feel the enjoyment. It was the most mentally exhausting period of my 12 years in wrestling." One of the problems, I'll say it right now, first of all, they have their own talent complaining. Ricky Starks has complained publicly he hasn't been used in months. Rusev was complaining. I don't know if they're using Rusev or not. His AEW run has been a failure, but at least he's getting paid. Jake Hager recently said in a podcast that Tony Khan is really busy, and that might be one of the reasons why he's not used. Lots of people publicly complaining about the company. Those are just some of them. But why they keep using these Japanese wrestlers who nobody but smart marks know is one of the reasons they're considered uncool. New Japan, it'd be one thing if they were like in the height of their popularity, but New Japan Pro Wrestling is at an all-time low, and you're taking these guys that are barely known in North America and putting them in main event matches. It'd be one thing if it was like a one-time pay-per-view or a yearly pay-per-view, but to continuously feature these fairly unknown guys is one of the reasons you're considered uncool. As far as this AEW moving to a residence in Dallas, it's one of the reasons, according to Observer, could be because they're having a difficult time selling tickets to Collision. So they're moving to a smaller building, just over 2,000 seats for 6 or 7 weeks in a row this summer to test it out. But Meltzer says it's going to be very hard for them to sell tickets more than 1,000 or even get more than 1,000 people in this building past the 2 or 3 week mark, because he brings up that NXT is in the same building week after week with free tickets, but it only holds 200-ish. Raw at the Manhattan Center, when they first started Raw, New York City, one of the biggest cities in the world, they were only running once a month because they were doing 4 weeks of tapings at once. And after a few months, they were only drawing 300 at the Manhattan Center. TNA at Universal Studios were having people on the grounds, like, really selling tickets to people. Not selling, but, like, selling the fact that you could go free to a TV taping to the people that were at Universal Studios anyways. There were very few people at those tapings, maybe 100 to 200-ish fans actually there for the wrestling. Ring of Honor was doing free shows towards the end of their run under Sinclair. I mean, they did one at a big arena in Baltimore, hardly had any people, um, with Nick Aldis as one of the headliners. So, like, even after a while, when your product is not hot anymore, it's hard to get people to go even for free. I find it funny for their quote unquote cost cutting. They're going to the smaller arena and probably getting a better deal to have a residency. And they cut about 8 or 9 people that weren't even known a month or so ago. Right after CM Punk did an interview about saying AEW isn't run like a business, there's literally 40 or 50 people they could cut from their roster that aren't over and aren't being used. Seriously, they have too many people on their roster than they can actually promote into stars. One person you should cut is this Takashita guy publicly complaining he's not over. He's not over. Cut him. Why? And why is he even in a main event in North America on a major pay-per-view when no one people like me don't care? Unless it's like an AEW versus New Japan special thing, a random guy that's not over, that's publicly complaining about your company in a non-title match. Why should anyone give a crap about that match? Will Ospreay, Sasha Banks, aka Mercedes Moné, and Okada have not paid off for the reportedly millions of dollars they're getting paid. Interest is dropping on a weekly basis. Meltzer said that they should dump a lot of their titles and try and establish the titles as important. Like, unlike the time when Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan were champion in the 80s and even early 90s, those world titles meant something. The current guy that's world champion AEW is not even a household name, and the title is not over. It's like the person that's looked at it in as the best in the company in AEW is guys like Moxley, Chris Jericho, even Kenny Omega is looked at higher than the guy that they have as champion now. Bryan Danielson's is looked as higher. So the champion right now isn't someone that's looked at as the top guy by far. And Meltzer went on to say the WBD and AEW should be alarmed by the numbers they're getting now. Ticket sales are not good. Vancouver getting the 5,000 plus was an outliner. It was their debut in the market, and that's one of the top 3 populated cities in Canada. And what do they do on the Vancouver show? Advertise guys like Moxley that aren't even on the show, that are booked for New Japan in front of a crowd that was like 2,600 to 3,000, despite on like according to reports, like they have a guy advertised for Vancouver with a big crowd that they put on a New Japan show in front of a much smaller crowd the same night for a different company. He's prioritizing the wrong company. The Young Bucks, major stars, both the Young Bucks are more over than the current AEW champion. They're on the New Japan show in front of a crowd half the size of Vancouver the same night. Do they just not care about Canada? We know they false advertised on every single Canadian show. Maybe they just don't care about Canada. Who knows? Apparently, there's a communication issue in AEW where there's not like a chain of command where you could actually get messages to the top, according to reports, which is why a lot of the wrestlers speak out publicly. As AEW gets closer and closer, and like there is very little difference in the AEW and NXT rating right now for Dynamite and NXT. NXT beats Rampage and Collision every week by far, but the Dynamite rating is getting closer. And when they renew the TV deal, NXT is making far less than AEW right now. Are the companies that are going to offer AEW deals be like? Are they going to be like, well, NXT is only getting, I don't know what it is, 26 million a year or whatever it is. We're not going to pay you more than NXT is getting. You're very close to the AEW number. That could be a factor. Be interesting to see. They still haven't uh, re-signed or have a new TV deal, which runs out at the end of the year. Somebody making fun of the guy's name. I mean, that's one of the issues, and I'm just saying, like, in Japan, there's not a lot of American wrestlers. Why are there so many wrestlers on this AEW roster from Japan? One of the issues is it's hard to pronounce the names. There's a communication issue. It's hard to get people over when there's such a cultural difference. If it's one thing if there's one or two of them and you can really get them over and it's rare and it's like it's easy, but when you have so many on a roster, it waters it down. Good afternoon to Humble. Betrayed by Sin says AEW was going downhill when they falsely advertised a Fight Forever video game. Apparently, they kept saying that video game was going to turn the company around, and there's been and there, sorry, there's been nothing but complaints about that AEW video game. AEW has all these wrestlers. Seriously, like 85% of the AEW wrestlers are not over. This is legit. This is not being arrogant. Ric Flair knows who I am. Hulk Hogan knows who I am. Steve Austin knows who I am. How many people do Ric Flair? If you just ask Steve Austin, Hulk Hogan, and Ric Flair, name me a bunch of the AEW roster people. Could they even name more than 10 or 15% of who these people are? I can't myself. I really can't. They have so many no names with contracts. It's ridiculous. Hugh Janus is my funny name is not impressed by AEW. Will not be forced to watch anymore. I recently saw Eric Bischoff did a comparison to WCW in '99 to AEW current day. I could still watch WCW in '99. I cannot watch current AEW. I can't even watch the clips anymore. It's getting so bad. Like that whole angle that Tony Khan did with himself that we haven't heard much about since it happened. I mean, that was not a success. It just made them look foolish. Anyway, they couldn't. They really couldn't. They seriously couldn't. People could not name these. They have too many people to get over, and they use Rampage and Collision as throwaway shows. They need to cut a bunch, focus on who they're going to get over, and get those people over. The Attitude Era did it great, and Vince Russo said it. And you can say what you want about Vince Russo. He was booking WWE at its most successful. He got everybody on every show. He found something, even if it was in a quick segment. So these guys aren't just sitting at home getting bitter and feeling useless and getting their money wasted. Like why do you pay so many people to just throw away money when they're not doing anything? Jeff Hardy. Why aren't you using Jeff Hardy? Matt Hardy said he was healthy weeks ago. He would have got one of the biggest pops in Vancouver if you'd used him there. Guaranteed. Jake the Snake's under contract. He would have got one of the biggest pops in Vancouver. Why was there so many no names in Vancouver? And false advertising that Rampage was going to be taped after Dynamite this week in Washington when it wasn't. It's being taped tonight in Oregon. There's so much false advertising. And showing the videotape of CM Punk, that was the best rating they got in a long time, and it like showed that hey, WWE guys are more over than us, even worse than WWE and WCW in 2000. I agree. Humble 85. Here's a woman's perspective. Everything in AEW is optics. They should invest in some more attractive wrestlers. They have people that could be good consultants, by the way, Humble. They have Jim Ross. I mean, from what I understand, Arn Anderson might still be with them. They have guys like Jake the Snake, but from what I understand, Tony Khan does not does not listen. And I'm not saying this to hire me. The best thing I can do right now is just help Jack Kilby get Great North Wrestling going again, and try and give a good run of creating alternative products. And maybe if we're lucky, Vince McMahon is going to come back and create alternative products. But June 29th, I'm going to continue to try and help Jack Kilby create an alternative product in Great North Wrestling. And yes, AEW, we'll say this one more time for Betrayed by Sin. They keep putting people on the posters that don't show up, and they're advertising stuff that's going to happen on the events that don't show up. They're a $1 billion company. You can't tell me on the day of John Moxley no-showed every single Canadian event. That's a fact. He no-showed every single Canadian event of 2024. There's been 7 or 8. Why did they continue putting him on the poster? Why did they put Chris Jericho on the posters when he wasn't at like half the Canadian events and he's one of the top wrestlers they have? Humble, I think everyone agrees that wrestling does need to become more edgy and more sex appeal. For sure. And honestly, I understand that they kicked somebody out for verbally harassing Blue Sky the other week in Edmonton. I understand that, but it was news for like a week. that does not make their why does it have to become a big news story? Why can't you just throw the guy out? Because I understand her issue, but it does not make their wrestlers look tough to, like, have people thrown out for verbally harassment when in the old days, people would get attacked. I sympathize with her, I'm sorry she had that experience, but those type of situations should be dealt with quietly. To make a big deal out of it, it just shows that wrestlers don't have as thick a skin as they used to have. Anyways, guys, it is the definition of false advertising what they've been doing. Anyways, thanks for your opinions. Write them in the comments. Appreciate all of you. Have a good afternoon. I'm going to do some cardio.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please help me out and like this video, then click the subscribe and get notifications buttons so you don't miss any of my latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates.